It's time for the Unofficial 40. Soonerscoop.com's very official recruiting podcast featuring Soonerscoop.com recruiting publisher Josh McCuistion. Get your recruiting fix from the leader in Sooner recruiting. It's the Unofficial 40 with your hosts, Soonerscoop.com publishers Carey Murdoch and Josh McCuistion.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It is another Unofficial 40 Soonerscoop.com podcast. This is for the week of Monday 6th through Friday the 10th. And normally, this would be, in all other worlds of Bob Stoops' existence, this would have been the first week of spring football. Sooners getting ready to go on spring break next week, but as it stands, they pushed it back to the 21st this year. We did have Pro Day this week, so we got plenty to talk about. Josh McCuistion was down at the Dallas Nike camp last weekend, and we got the Rivals New Orleans camp, I believe, coming up this weekend. And we now welcome in Josh McCuistion, who joins us from his studio. Josh, how you doing?
Good, guys. Just I'm anxious to hear some takes on Pro Day.
Eddie Radosevich and Joe Duvall join us here in studio, and we were talking about this earlier. There was a video that surfaced today of a guy doing an interview on the BBC, and his kids come strolling in right in the middle. Like the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, this would be like the equivalent of like NBC News. A guy doing a Skype interview, and his kids just come waltzing in the room behind him, and we just thought to ourselves, man, that is like Josh during every podcast right there.
It's sometimes the dog, sometimes a kid. I mean, there's the exciting part for me is that there's always a variable. It could always be someone.
Is there an Asian nanny ready to just like slide into frame and grab the dog?
We are Sans Asian nanny. I'm part Asian nanny in this house. That's pretty much part of my role too. So I'm a man of many hats in this house.
That's the best part of the video. If you haven't seen it, it's the nanny crawling in like an army crawling.
She's sliding into second base.
She's terrified for her life that this guy's going to see her.
You think she gets beaten?
I mean, she's done. As Eddie and I were talking, she's no longer working there, right, Eddie?
I'm sure that's why she was so late in getting in, is because you can only go so far when you're chained to the wall.
God, Eddie, as a man who can understand the anger that woman clearly lives under, how far did he go? Like, he didn't just fire Eddie. Like, so what was the next step? Like, did he take her?
Probably
like, he found a way to foreclose on her home. Like, how did he really do it?
Probably sent her out of the country. She probably is no longer in England.
Reported her to Trump.
Yeah.
No, I think he was American.
Oh, was he?
I think it was
It
was a really horrible office. It had it was decorated by like a map that was hanging on the wall.
That was weird. There was no backdrop. It was obviously in the corner of a room. That was odd. It was really funny though.
Josh, if you did a setup, would you do if you did a video, would you do the Schefter setup with puts the little mini football helmets around you? Is that how you'd roll?
I think probably. Like, I'm sitting in my desk in my office, and there's just a big wall behind me, and there's a chair rail and some kind of I don't even know how you describe it. Like, within the room, there are these trim pieces that are kind of shaped out all the way around the room. It's kind of like a design on the wall. And I don't know if I would stick the two things in my office that are framed are the Indianapolis Star from the day that the Colts won the Super Bowl and the day that the Colts in that same year came back and beat the Patriots finally in that AFC Championship game. Those are the two framed things that hang in this office, and I don't know if I would arrange them to be behind me or not. I don't think so. That would look – it's a little fanboyish even for me to admit that. So to have them prominently displayed seems unlikely.
I'm happy that Peyton Manning could get your Colts one Super Bowl championship just like he got my Broncos one. It seems like a fair trade-off there for both of us.
Well, he also got us Andrew Luck, who's going to bring at least 2 or 3 before, as long as I can get that Bill Belichick assassination plan in place, then we're going to be fine.
And a defense and an offensive line and
I got my the GM removal plan went into action this year, so my first step is well underway.
I would 100% advise Andrew Luck to make the playoffs before we start talking about Super Bowls.
What? See, okay. Andrew Luck has become people like forgot. Like last year, they were like, "Is Andrew Luck? Is he overrated?" 2 years ago, the guy was in the AFC Championship game. Like people act like he just invented, like he just is this made up thing. Now he got destroyed in that AFC Championship game. But how many of those did that happen to Peyton in before he finally got over the hump?
In a world where Mike Glennon is worth $14 million, Andrew Luck is he's godlike
gold. He's a
figure.
gold bar. Like
Mike Glennon getting $15 million a year is also just crazy town.
If you're in the NFL and you're going to take 5 guys in the league, like you have the top 5 guys that you're going to start a franchise with, I don't think there's any person on earth that wouldn't have Andrew Luck in that 5.
Are you saying just quarterback, or are you saying overall?
Overall.
Whew. Cam Newton.
Well, I mean, look at it this way. Look at Cam Newton was league MVP, and then he's just trash now because of last year. I mean, he wasn't great last year, but his defense, as soon as they lost, what's his name, crying guy, Luke Kuechly, his defense just went to trash. I mean,
they were not very good.
No.
But the thing you also have to consider,
but you can't tell me that Cam Newton isn't one of the best physical freak quarterbacks that's in the league right now.
100%. But how long can Cam Newton play the way Cam Newton plays?
As long as his body holds up.
I mean, that's the thing. Like Andrew Luck can play his way if he has an offensive line, he can play till he's 40, 42. He can do just like Brady's done. But Cam Newton ain't going to play that long. I don't care how big and strong he is, which he's a freak show. But you can't run like that and survive in the league because there are guys bigger and faster than you.
Now, I think having a guy like Deshaun Watson in the draft, like Mitch Trubisky, he looks great. He looks the part, all that stuff. I wouldn't put my franchise on Mitch Trubisky if my life depended on it.
Not a chance.
Although
Deshaun Watson, I'd definitely, he's the guy I'd take. I don't see any other quarterback. I mean, like Russell Wilson, that happens every once in a while. That happens. I mean, it happened with Drew Brees. Yeah, Dak Prescott. That stuff happens, but it's just the NFL is a bizarre league in that you can be a great quarterback and go to a team in a horrible situation without a defense, without an offensive line, and you'll never be any. I mean, you're not going to convince me that Sam Bradford in a really good situation wouldn't be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL.
I think he can still be Carson Palmer if he finds the right situation.
100%. I completely agree. So Sam's accuracy, like people that haven't seen it close up, it's hard to understand. Like really great quarterbacks can't spin it like he can spin it. Like, I mean, there's something very special about that skill for him, and he's just never had a good situation. I mean, and he was just on the run and kind of outgunned from the minute he had to run a Jeff Fisher offense.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, talking about NFL stuff, let's just move on to Pro Day a little bit. Obviously, man, what's bizarre about this whole process is Joe Mixon didn't get to go to the Combine. Joe Mixon has all these issues in his past. All this talk about Joe Mixon and what he's done. But you know what? I'll say this. Joe Mixon, to me, has done about as many of the right things as you can do. Let's face it, he screwed up for a very long time. But ever since he apologized right before Christmas, other than hiring an agent that's kind of stupid, I can't really say that Joe Mixon has done anything wrong throughout this process in comparison to Dede Westbrook. When you look at the two, like, this is how you handle a situation. And Dede Westbrook was never really under fire like Joe Mixon was. Yet Dede Westbrook continually does things that makes me question whether I would want to waste a draft pick on him.
It was always really interesting, too, that, you see a guy like Dede Westbrook who was basically given the opportunities that Joe wasn't, and then completely turned around and then doing, yeah, exactly. The senior combine or senior Pro Bowl thing was, or Senior Bowl was really weird. He could have gone to the Senior Bowl, but he turned down the invite. Yeah, and then you go into the Indianapolis thing, him not working out and sounding like he just completely collapsed in all the interviews that he did up there with GMs and teams, and it's really weird. And I thought there was no better like representation of that was just our 8-minute conversation with the two at OU's Pro Day on Wednesday. It was just I just think that Dede is really, really immature, and hopefully he wakes up before it's too late.
He's 23 years old, though.
That's the crazy thing is he is older.
Is he just a knucklehead, and he's just stamped with that forever?
I don't know. It just like the whole like, and I don't know. He very well could have been lying about it, but the whole thing about like eating McDonald's even though you're not supposed to. I know it's like a really like.
He got excited about talking about
trivial
that
thing, but I don't think that that's exactly what you want to go in and tell a GM. Like,
no,
yeah, I'm not doing what my trainer tells me to do because I like eating McDonald's.
Once you're in the league already and doing well, if you're Calvin Johnson or if you're Deshaun Hopkins or whatever, you can do that. You can say, all right, I like McDonald's and I'm out here putting up 1,500, 1,500 yard seasons anyway. If I'm Antonio Brown, I can say I love eating 2 Whoppers a day, and the Steelers won't have anything to say about it. But if you're fighting for a job, I just don't understand giving anybody any reason not to take you, and he's done that a lot. I also think Joe's done that a few times, but I don't get why give anybody any excuse to put a negative in your column. I don't get it. If you have a chance to go run for him, go run for him. If you have a chance to go to the Senior Bowl, go to the Senior Bowl. Expose yourself. You look defensive if you don't. You look like you're hiding something if you don't do those things.
Well, then he tweeted out stuff yesterday.
Amazing.
And it had like a Young Money watermark on it, which is his agency, that said he ran a 4.29 in the 40 when he never ran anything close to that.
Alternative fact.
I mean, it's just, I look at that stuff and I'm just a guy just watching. What does a GM think about that? That's scrutinizing these guys, every little thing that they do.
No one's going to be fooled by the graphic he put up. You think there's a GM? Oh man, you ran a 4.29. We're good. Like, why would you lie? They check that stuff out.
Does Young Money think that they're doing a MTV Cribs episode or something? Like that perception is reality? These GMs don't play that stupid crap.
Well, and that
or coaches. You think Mike Zimmer, who was there, looks at that and says, "Oh well, he must have been better than I thought."
Everybody else must have just been lying. It's bewildering that he thinks that you could just get away with that stuff, but at the same time, I just don't know if there's anybody in his corner that he really needs telling him, cut this shit out. You don't need to be doing this right now 2 months before the draft or 1 month before the draft.
Oh, you had him with a 4.34. That's plenty fast.
That's great.
Just write that down.
I don't know. It's really weird. And, I think still, too, that, Dede is an extremely good wide receiver. It's going to be interesting, though, to see where he ends up, just because I don't think that he's not a guy that you can bring in. I don't think he's a Sterling.
Somebody asked me before OU Pro Day, and Josh, feel free to comment on this, too. Who do you think would go first, Dede or Westbrook? And I immediately said, Westbrook. Or Joe Mixon or Dede Westbrook. Immediately, the thought that popped in my head was, Dede Westbrook will go first because he doesn't have the baggage. Now it's added up to the point where, I think Joe Mixon might go before Dede Westbrook now.
100%.
I think it's almost certain at this point. Dede's hurt himself. And something Eddie said earlier, it kind of made me think of this. How much did Joe, going through what he did and announcing at the time he did in that story about Dede's problems kind of coming out, how much did Joe shield Dede? Because all anybody wanted to talk about was Joe, and that story with Dede kind of just went away. Like, everybody was mad about it for a couple of days, and then it went right back to, Joe Mixon, and he's going to, there was all of that talk. So at every turn, Joe has given Dede an advantage, and at every turn, Dede's not taking advantage of it. So I don't – this whole thing is weird, but at this point, I don't think there can be any doubt that Joe's going to go before Dede. I don't think there's any question anymore.
As bad as Peter Schaefer, who is Joe Mixon's agent, came off and has come off and, is looked in this thing, he looks like the agent of the year compared to Young Money Sports Agency or whatever they're called.
I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that the guy is he's a complete loser, but he knows what he's talking about. I mean, he's done this for quite a while, hasn't he?
You talking about Lil Wayne?
No,
Peter Schaefer.
Peter Schaefer. I mean, he represented Barry Sanders. He represented guys that have been in the NFL.
Adam Jones, he represents.
Yeah, and Adam Jones just keeps continuing to get opportunities. I mean, he gets arrested at a strip club, hits a stripper, or chokes her out or something. Next day, he's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go sign with whatever team.
I think it was the Cowboys.
Lil Wayne and Peter Schaefer are the exact opposite people. Schaefer's a loser that knows what he's doing, and Wayne is not a loser and has no idea what he's doing.
It's ironic.
I mean, Dede Westbrook, the name of your representation has been to prison, and people can remember that. Like in recent memory, he's been to prison.
It feels like a marketing thing, right? It feels like
not that I don't, appreciate the theme song to, Ballers, but
I say it's a marketing thing. It feels like they're trying to make Dede cool, and I don't. Maybe it's working. Maybe there are people out there think, oh yeah, Dede is cool, but that's not who they need to be selling to right now. That's not the target audience right now. Your target audience is GMs, and GMs don't give a. Oh shoot, sorry.
That's gonna have to be beeped.
I have to edit. They don't give a hoot. We're gonna start over.
Start over what? The whole podcast?
God bless
No,
America.
we're trying to get this thing over with.
No, not
Can
the
we
whole
do
podcast.
like a
from that
Young
thought.
Money
From
audio
that thought.
over that instead of like a straight beep?
Yeah. Can I
Well,
start
I'd
over
rather have Lil Wayne cussing than you,
I'm not as good at it.
obviously. No, but your point is valid, although grotesque and profane.
Yeah.
Our first F-bomb.
I really thought it was going to be me.
I would have bet money on it.
I was gonna say hoot, and I thought, don't say hoot. That's a stupid thing to say. And then it just came out.
Leave it up to the hipster folk guy to get so mad at Lil Wayne that he can't control himself and drops an F-bomb.
If he's allowed to say it, I'm allowed to say it.
You're not even in a man bun today.
No. Does that matter? Does a man bun?
I
mean
just
you can
think
cuss?
that it would make your head tighter and make you more susceptible to anger.
We've hated him since he didn't show up at Coachella in 2015.
I don't even know. I don't even know where Coachella is. Is it?
It's in California.
PGA West.
Is that the one in the desert?
Yeah.
Yeah, you stay on a golf course.
I know it's a lot of money to go to.
And houses that you can rent on a golf course. Yeah.
Some people stay in the houses, but
Yeah.
most people just sleep on the fairways.
That's where trust fund
Intense.
hipsters go.
I would have to get a house. It's really funny too that everybody, we've spent all this time talking about Joe Mixon, we spent all this time talking about Dede Westbrook, and it's almost like
Jordan Evans.
It kind of goes into it. Well, Jordan Evans was amazing, but Samaje Perine goes to the combine, has a pretty good workout, and he still gets overshadowed by Joe Mixon. It's kind of just been like the story of his career.
But you know what, Young Money? He's not getting overshadowed by the GMs that were there. They
That's
look
true.
at the tape and they care about the tape and all that stuff.
Jordan Evans, by the way, he had the best vertical of any linebacker at the combine if he had been there, and he would have ran the second fastest 40 of any linebacker at the combine, only behind Jabril Peppers, who was basically a safety at Michigan. So of guys that played linebacker last year in college football that are going to be in the draft, he was the fastest and jumped the highest. And by the way, Jordan Evans isn't some guy that's like 5'11", 215 pounds. He's 6'2", 232. So I think he did everything possible to make himself a draftable player.
He had a great OU Pro Day.
I think there's no question now that he's going to get drafted. I think it's just a matter of when, right?
I think he gets drafted, and Josh, you could speak to this really well. I don't think anybody in the NFL is going to look to play this guy as a middle linebacker.
No, that was the first thought as Joe was talking all about all that. You look at that, the testing stuff. That's an NFL will linebacker in a 4.3. I mean, that's what they're looking for. So I mean, he'll get a shot. He's got a good pedigree. He's a locker room kid. Like there's a lot. Like because he's one of those kids that NFL scouts are going to go back and talk to Bob about, and Bob's going to be like, yeah, he was one of the rocks of our team. I mean, he was as we went, he went. So I think that'll. It really wouldn't shock me if he's a 5th round pick. Like and last week at this time I would have said probably undrafted free agent and nothing more than a cup of coffee. But that's why people always wonder, why these kids go off and train, while they just stay at OU and work and both. This is why, so they can because there are stories like this every year where a kid that you were like, maybe he's going to get a real shot now to make a roster.
I was talking about this morning on my radio show because we're talking to Mark Cooper of Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State sent 2 guys to the combine, or had 2 guys get invited to the combine, and Ashton Lampkin and Vincent Taylor. OU had a guy invited that wasn't even on their team, and Charles Walker. I counted up this way, there were 7 guys in the Big 12, defensive guys, that got invited to the combine. And like Jordan Stearns had a really good pro day at OSU, and then the Burton kid, the linebacker, put up some monster numbers as well. And then Jordan Evans puts up these monster numbers. It really is like the bias of the Big 12 having no defenses seeped into hurting them now and just getting invites to the combine.
Yeah, and Jordan Willis from K-State, the Big 12's Defensive Player of the Year, he had a really good combine.
Yeah.
I was reading stuff on Dede Westbrook too, and scouts were saying, the competition he's going up against is just not good. He's going up against poor competition. And I'm wondering, how well do they truly know how good that corner is? Maybe they know. Maybe they see that, man, all these corners in the Big 12 are just terrible. But I wonder how much of that is just a bias seeping in. If there's, if they're just prejudging the Big 12 in that kind of way. Now, the Big 12 has given them, ample ammunition to do that. But I think that's also, if you look at the state of college football, that's kind of how college football is in general now. The Big 12 may have been ahead of the curve in 08 and 09 when all those quarterbacks were there and they were having these huge numbers. But now that's just college football across the board. Did you see the SEC defenses, what they gave up in the bowl games? That's what happens. When Nick Saban plays a spread team, that's what happens. That's what happens with offenses the way they are now. It's not just a Big 12 thing anymore. And I think it might take a few years for that to fully phase out. But I don't think it's just a Big 12 problem anymore to have bad defenses.
Well, it does.
To me, go ahead, Carey.
No, you go ahead, Josh.
Unless you're talking about, a written article or a YouTube video breakdown, to me, there's a good chance you are not a great evaluator if you're on television in the first 30 and you got 30 or 45 seconds to talk, and you're going to choose to spend that time talking about the level of competition. Man, do you know how many great NFL players played at FCS level, lower NAIA? I mean, like, you go down the list, there are guys that played garbage competition. But it's like I say when I watch these kids in high school, because I see this all the time. I mean, they're usually the kid I'm there to watch is the only Division I player on that football field. That's usually the way that works. But if you can't decipher, well, he's very good, and if he doesn't dominate accordingly, then okay. But Dede Westbrook, even if you want to argue that he didn't play great competition, he dominated that competition to a fashion that you should against lesser opponents. So, I mean, that's one of those things where, to me, that's really lazy. And it always bothers me when people bring up level of competition, because to me it tells me you don't know what you're looking at.
How many times does that happen, though, in the war room when they're trying to decide between player A and player B, and then, say player A played in, the American Conference versus player B who played in the SEC? I mean,
well, let's go Jared Goff versus Carson Wentz.
Yeah, okay, I guess that's a pretty good comparison.
And everybody went with Jared Goff because they felt like he played a higher level of competition.
Yeah.
And it turns out Carson Wentz is a hell of a lot better quarterback than Jared Goff so far.
Well, and that's kind of my point. Like, if all things are equal, if you go down 27 qualifiers and you feel like, it's pretty close, and you feel like, okay, the big school guy, that makes more sense. I get that. I'm just saying, like, if that's one of the first 2 or 3 things that you want to talk about, it doesn't. I don't know. That just doesn't sit well with me.
I mean, look, you look at what Deshaun Watson did against Alabama last year, or the last 2 years. That should say something to you. I mean, you're not going to see a guy face better competition in a critical situation where a game means that much than what Deshaun Watson did 2 years in a row. Now, I'm not saying that means that he should be a star in the NFL. I'm just saying, if all things are equal, and I'm looking at Mitch Trubisky versus Deshaun Watson, I'm putting my reputation on the line for Deshaun Watson because of what he did against Alabama in the physical tools that he has. I mean, I don't think Trubisky, did he outrun Watson in the 40? I don't think he did. I think it was like 4.68 to 4.71 or something like that. But, I mean, it's close, and I'm sure there's some things that Trubisky looks better. And I'll admit, I watched the combine. I watched him run around. I watched him throw. He looks, I mean, like, if I didn't know he played at North Carolina, and I didn't know any of the helmets, that they wore in college, I would say, man, that kid really deserves a strong look.
He played really well in the bowl game. I just remember
Trubisky
watching that in New Orleans while we were down there, and he kind of led them. They played awful the entire game, and he led them in the fourth quarter to within, I think, a 2-point conversion.
And maybe they'll both be great quarterbacks, but I'm just saying, I mean, it matters to me what Deshaun Watson did in big games against the best competition.
Yeah, and with Deshaun Watson, it's not just that he won games, because I think people did that with Vince Young. Man, look at all those games he won. He was just a winner with those physical tools, and they drafted him, and the Titans took him in the top 10. And then you find out, well, he doesn't really have the drive to get better. He's not a great thrower of the football, doesn't have great accuracy, so those things don't really translate to the NFL. Deshaun Watson can throw the football. He completed 70% of his passes a year ago. I don't see this. If there's a fatal flaw in Deshaun Watson, I don't see it, and I've seen what he can do on the field, and I've seen it succeed. So I'm with you, Carey, especially in a job like that that's so volatile. You can lose it with one wrong draft pick. Give me Watson. I like Trubisky. I like what he has, but if I'm putting pen to paper, I'm writing down Watson if I know my job's on the line.
But, I mean, back to the point we're talking about. I mean, players of the Big 12, the level of competition or whatever. Look, you're seeing it with some of these guys that didn't get invited to the Combine. The reason that they're on the field in the Big 12 is because they can run, because they can change direction, because they are big and fast, and you're not always getting that in the Big Ten when you go look at defensive guys. Now, you might find big, strong guys on the defensive line, great linebackers, maybe some safeties, but, man, the linebackers can really run in the Big 12, and that's what matters to the NFL. Can you run? Is your speed better than 95% of the rest of this draft class?
I'm kind of in between on Jordan Evans. I think that, I don't know how surprised I am that he did really well as far as numbers wise, but I don't know. It seemed like he disappeared so much in those first 6 games.
He's not an inside guy. I mean, that's the thing with Jordan. I mean, he needs to be somebody on the outside that can chase down the ball and make plays.
It'll be interesting. I don't know.
He's not going to have to cover a lot of teams like Texas Tech in the NFL. I mean, he's not going to be doing that's the big glaring negative against Jordan Evans, is that Texas Tech tape. And while there are plenty of effort issues that were in there as well, that's also a scheme he's not really going to have to cover a lot against in the NFL, especially if he's a 4-3 outside linebacker. So I think that with Jordan, I said this in my article, he by far had the best pro day, especially when you consider where he came from and where his stock is now. And part of that reason is just flat speed. He ran a 4.5 40. One of the reasons why Joe Mixon and Dede Westbrook are going to get drafted probably fairly high, even despite their past, is because Joe Mixon ran a 4.4 340 and Dede ran the 4.3 440. When you're that fast, that's football now. You have to be that fast, and you can. Nowhere else was that more apparent when you saw Dakota Austin's 40 time. What, you ran a 4.9? And that guy, that made the Houston game come in complete perspective when you look back on it. How did they ever expect for Dakota Austin to lock down one half of the field when he's 5'10 and running 4.9s? It was just, you can see where the talent is that you need to win and where the talent was that it just couldn't hold up before.
By the way, I will say this. I am so glad that both Eddie and Joe were there at Pro Day, because Pro Day has turned, I've gotten so old. Pro Day has turned into this thing where it's like a big family reunion. So you have all these former players that are there. You have the coaches that are out there hanging around. And it literally was like I could not walk 5 feet without running into somebody else. It was just like, oh, my God, I haven't seen you in so long. And it was, I mean, it's cool because you get some kind of good information. Like Gerald McCoy was there, and Gerald McCoy is Josh McCuistion's biggest fan. Still to this day, you have a bromance there, Josh, that is beyond any other bromance.
Well, Gerald and I have that, but the real relationship in the McCoy and connection is Tiffany and Gerald's dad. There is some serious love between those two people. That's a special thing.
Gerald's dad, man. He is the best. Like, you cannot help but just smile as soon as we saw each other. We both just started laughing. Because, there's all kinds of stuff. And, every time I see Gerald and his dad, I just think about his mom, too. Patricia was her name, right?
Yep, that's her. Yep.
She died of an aneurysm. I was trying to think, did she die, right his first season in Tampa Bay or right before?
No, he was still in Norman.
Was he still in OU?
That was I want to say the spring following his, would have been 06. When he redshirted, and that spring going into 07, I want to say it's when she passed. I know he was still in Norman, and I think that's the right year.
That's right, because Adrian Peterson was still around. I remember the last time she was at a practice was when Adrian Peterson was still at OU.
Yep. She was, and super sweet lady. Like the thing I always remember when I think about her, I went over to the McCoy's house one time to do an interview and just kind of meet them, catch up with them a little bit, because they really, I mean, they ingratiated into the family. Like for a long time, his dad would call me for Christmas and wish me, Merry Christmas. So they're just that kind of family. And I had gone over to do an interview, and afterward I was like going to get a new mugshot of Gerald. So I go outside and I go to take the picture, and Gerald's doing what most of the kids do, man. He had glasses on, and he's this huge hulking guy, and he looked kind of scary. If you didn't know Gerald, know what a sweet kid he is. And she kind of looks at him, she stops, and she goes, "You are not going to prison. Smile in your picture." And she literally made him smile for his rival's profile picture. And man, he couldn't have jumped to it more quickly when she said to. And it's still on his page to this day. So it's just funny how, these funny little memory stuff you remember about recruiting.
Well, it was, it's funny because like Gerald showed up and we talked for a little bit, and I talked to his dad for even longer. And then Mike Stoops saw him. So Mike got every single one of his defensive linemen that were there and brought him over to Gerald, and he wanted them to meet Gerald and talk to Gerald, and Gerald was more than happy to kind of talk to everybody that was on the current roster that wanted to come up there. But like Zach Sanchez came back. I'm trying to think of all the people that were there.
There were a ton of guys. Dominic Alexander was there.
Alexander was there.
Roy Williams was there.
Roy Williams,
yeah.
Rufus Alexander was there.
Dusty was there, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like
Little
just recent guys. Gabe Bikert and Blake Bell.
Gabe
Bell was
Bikert.
there, yeah.
Of course, Austin Woods was already a coach, so he was there. But yeah, I mean, it's just so many people, and it was good to, you have so many players too, and you kind of get little tidbits here and there, so it's good to talk to people. But my Lord, it's such a I don't want to say chore, but it really is to just kind of get through the people and go watch people, work out and practice. So like, I didn't see any of the benching and the bench press, and I didn't see Joe Mixon when everybody was hooping and hollering. It's like I had to go back and watch Eddie's video to see half the stuff that happened that day. But one of the interesting things that I noticed, and I shouted to him, but man, Ricky DeBerry is like so tiny now. Like he was never that skinny, even when we met him at the 5-star in Chicago. Like he is gearing up to move, to middle linebacker and be inside and really have a range of motion.
Yeah, I think people are going to hear that he's, you say tiny. He's not tiny. He's just skinny now.
Yeah.
He's not fat anymore.
No, there's no fat at all. He's like you can tell like he's taking things very seriously in terms of working out and getting in shape.
I think there's a very serious opportunity for him there. If everything goes well in spring, I think that, I think that he could beat out John Michael Terry. I know that they're really high on him in Norman, but there's somewhere in some position Ricky DeBerry can still play. I think I still have hope or belief that he can play and contribute at Oklahoma.
Yeah, and Baker Mayfield was out there. I saw Jeff
He's
Meade.
alive.
Yeah. Even though I guess the videotape is being released today, or the dash cam video.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure there's some losers that can't wait to blog about that. You know who you're talking about.
Oh, God. Some people got to make a living, Eddie. It's not our intention to piss off our subscribers by just going full police blotter all the time. I'm just trying to say there's two sides to every story.
People will click on it. And if people are going to... That's what I tell...
We're not a click-based operation.
That's what I tell my friends all the time. Like, what is with this thing? Why is this thing here? It's because you clicked on it. If you start clicking on this stuff, they're going to keep making it. So that's why that's going to keep happening.
And that's the other thing, like complaining about that. Like, you're just looking for clicks. Well... You clicked on it.
Yeah.
So don't be pissed at him because you clicked on it. All right. They got what they wanted, and you're just propagating like you're bitching about just looking for attention with clicks all the time, but you're the ones that are clicking on it. So it works. Ha ha.
I
the
guess
system won.
People will want to see it.
You get people that'll argue about us wanting attention, and you'll look at the thread and it's 400 replies long. Well, you're kind of feeding it if that's what you think it is.
Look, we operate on, you pay us a subscription. We write stories that we think subscribers would like to try. We're not set in getting attention. Like, we're not trying to write incendiary things in order to get the OU fan and the non-OU fan, and that's not what we do. That's not what we're about. But there are people out there that they need eyeballs to operate as a business. I'm not begrudging those people. And Eddie, you shouldn't either.
Begrudge the people that click on it.
That write those stories.
Yeah.
No matter how obsessed people may seem.
Very obsessed.
There are some that definitely write more of those stories than others. I'll grant you that. But those people aren't swimming in, gold swimming pools or anything.
Well,
they're basically digging ditches.
I think one thing is
journalistic ditches.
It's just interesting that how I guess how hard can you hammer a guy for getting drunk? That's basically my point.
Well,
harder.
You do it harder when they're a Heisman Trophy finalist.
Yeah.
If you don't want to get hammered that hard, don't be a Heisman Trophy finalist.
It's like the Joe Mixon thing.
Well, he didn't ask to be a Heisman Trophy.
Well, then don't
finalist.
get drunk in Arkansas and run from the cops.
He should be.
This is part of his penalty. Is going through this.
The further away we get from it, I think the more he should be applauded for getting drunk in Fayetteville.
That's you, though. Then that's why we love you, Eddie. That's how you view the world.
He should be applauded.
But it's
and if I see him in Dallas this weekend,
buy him a beer.
We'll go on Periscope.
Nobody uses Periscope anymore.
Facebook Live.
Except for like NFL teams.
Except for Antonio Brown. Or no, that was Facebook Live.
That was Facebook Live, yeah.
I think Facebook Live's how Skip Bayless gets all his stuff out now because no one's watching his show.
Yeah, literally nobody watches that show.
Skip Bayless, burn. Yeah, I had this argument the other day with somebody else, though. Everybody, like Richard Deitch and everybody, TV ratings and all those people on Twitter, they're I'm not saying fascinated, but it's the clickbait thing. I mean, it's people are interested. People hate Skip Bayless. They don't hate Rick Bayless. He's a fine cook. Skip Bayless, they hate him, or they hate Stephen A. Smith, and they're fascinated with their show is tanking and their number. Here's the thing, like none of those shows get really good ratings. Like every one of those shows pale in comparison to what Disney Toon Adventures is playing at that time of day. Because people don't watch ESPN. It's just like the Sports Center thing. Like they don't get good ratings because nobody's watching sports. People that normally would watch sports have jobs. Yeah. They're not at home at 11 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's why ESPN's having so many problems, because they can only sell premium advertising when it's at night or prime time or whatever. They can't sell expensive advertising at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
If you're not getting that many eyeballs and you're not making that much money, then they should be making better television. That stuff is just
just retreading
garbage.
Stuff.
That's just garbage. Just here you fight, you make up a position, you fight. Cool. That's the biggest nonsense ever. They're never getting to the bottom of anything. That's just
not highbrow enough for Joe.
Well, it's silly. It's just not creating.
He dropped an F-bomb earlier in the show.
It's just creating conflict. Why do you? It's nonsense. It's not getting to the bottom
hippie.
of it. I know. I'm sorry. But why? Do people like watching First Take? Is that
there
I
are
think
people.
Some people do.
And it's sad and it's pathetic.
It's people that don't know anything about sports.
I like. I watch Pardon the Interruption. That's kind of the same kind of style. But
I like Pardon the Interruption.
But at least those guys tend to ground their opinions in themselves.
Well, Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon, they're actually respected.
Right.
People who are still working in the field of journalism. Skip Bayless started, just sprouting things. He was born out of saying that Troy Aikman was gay.
Yeah.
And he realized how much attention. No, it's not true.
No, is it true that he said that?
Yeah,
he wrote a book about it.
What?
Yeah, that's where Skip Bayless, the guy that he is now, was born. And then it turned into LeBron. And then it turned into, he finds one little thing. He's very much like Traber. Just like the Tiger Woods will never win another major thing. They do the same thing. And then they brag about being right.
I mean,
it's a formula.
It's a formula, and there's a name for him. It's called douchebag. Both of them.
All right, I want to hit a little bit more on Pro Day before we move on to recruiting. Or we trash
I'm taking us way
any
off
ally that we may have in the future.
I'm the derailer.
I don't want them to be our allies.
Okay.
We'll fight both of them.
Who's we? You and the...
No, I will fight both of them.
With the junior varsity wrestler that you can beat up?
I'll join Eddie with the other two. I'll leave the wrestler for Eddie.
After the fight, come on, we all know Eddie would buy the junior varsity wrestler a beer, and they'll befriend each other, and then he'll be on Eddie's side.
Hey,
they'll roll together to the fight.
Speaking of new friends, I want to give a quick shout out to one of my new best friends.
Here we go.
Dane Evans did a really good job at Tulsa Pro Day today.
Yes, Dane Evans. Congratulations.
So congratulations, Dane.
Did you get
forward to no, that they're still soft as anything, but Dane Evans, my man, quarterback.
It was
Tulsa.
a beautiful Tulsa football at Tulsa. Is it _ football? Is it just Tulsa football?
I think it's Tulsa
Their
football.
Twitter account.
think
You
it's
can't look it
Tulsa
up, Eddie,
football.
because you're blocked.
It comes up. I just can't click on it.
Tulsa football.
At Tulsa football. So Dane Evans, you watched you heard an interview when you went over to Tulsa. Was that when you went over to talk to Patrick Fields?
Yeah, it was before I went to talk to Patrick Fields, and then before the where was? Oh yeah, Trey Young,
The Norman North game. Yeah. And so you
yeah.
heard an interview with him on the radio.
Yeah, and
you sent a shout out.
I
saying
sent
how
a
good
shout
interview
out
it was.
saying it was great. He sounded awesome. With he was up with Pop up on the Buzz up in Tulsa, so it was good. I'm a big fan of Dane Evans.
By the way, the Sooner Scoop podcast is radio neutral. Like, all radio stations are welcome and fine on the Sooner Scoop pod.
Absolutely.
Even though we all have affiliations, me specifically, I like that you guys get to go on other radios. So, thank you, radio stations of Oklahoma. I hold no grudges against you.
And anybody that wants to fight just can come to me. They don't have to come to you.
You know, this is a perfect time because Carey's given me just a small window. I'd like to say that my co-publisher has brought me on fewer times than Al Eschbach.
I mean, we don't have any guests other than, we have the practice report for OU. We have the OSU practice report.
You want me to be a movie guy? Do I need to be a movie guy to get on? Is that what's happening here?
Our movie guy's pretty good. I don't know.
He is really good. I'm not nearly that good. So, yeah.
I think he
that's
writes
fair.
for the Washington Post, too. So,
Really?
Wow.
Well, I think like blogs or something
yeah.
like that. But he gets to go to like the things where the Critics' Choice Awards and hobnobs with like George Clooney and all those people.
Walks down the red carpet.
Yeah.
Does all that.
But I guess we're just gonna have to. Yes, I will
I'm
admit,
messing
Josh.
with you. You know I do not care.
You would bring up a point that I'm sure you're joking about, but you're hurt. You're crying on the inside. But you're right. I did think several times, during January, maybe we should have a thing with Josh. And I will bring this up. This will not go unnoticed, Josh. But Al loves having you on. I mean, Al.
Do you know that's the craziest thing? Signing day, I only did 4 shows. Usually, I have to get people to do it in advance because I don't have enough time to do the work for the site I need to do and all the radio stuff. But OU was so far done that there was very little interest in talking to Josh McCuistion on signing day. It was a really boring signing day for me.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is I'm just trying to keep you from living that thug life that I live, where radio eventually seeps into your Sooner Scoop work. We already have one derelict in myself. We don't need another. We make sure that you are taken care of. You're the golden child. People don't realize Josh is the golden child. When it comes to payday, when it comes to, time off, when you take your luxury vacations, and the rest of us, we're here to serve you and to make your life easier. It's it's kind of like Google. It's we give you arcade games and, nap rooms and things like that.
I guess we should just go with this legend that Josh takes these great vacations. My best vacation was to Mexico that I used my points on Southwest that I largely accumulated from work to go to Mexico for 4 days last year. That was my big. And then the other was a road trip with my in-laws to Pensacola, Florida. That was the other with a 2-year-old in tow.
Your in-laws drink though, so that's not.
My
a bad
in-laws
trip.
will party. There is no question about it.
If you have in-laws that drink, those family vacations are never terrible.
True. And my in-laws pick up the tab on a lot of stuff, so that's the good. That's the other good in that front. So that's
makes it easy to hang out with them.
That is 100% factual, Eddie.
Joe,
you are absolutely right.
Joe, you don't like your in-laws. They don't drink, do they?
My in-laws don't like me. I'll put it that way.
Fair enough.
And do they drink?
No, not really.
See? Bad in-laws. Eddie, take note.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't have any in-laws.
When you meet she's not Mrs. Right until her parents are borderline alcoholic.
one of my best friends, both his parents and her parents are incredibly close. Like, they go on vacations together. And I've never heard of that. Like, it's the damnedest thing ever. Like, my parents
really
and
weird,
Tiffany's parents, they're okay. They get along fine.
You just want to get along. You want to be cordial. You want to be able to be in the same room and
Christmas.
not want to scratch your eyes out. Yeah.
Spend a Thanksgiving.
I always say I go with the Lieutenant Dan method when I'm over at the in-laws. Yeah. Get down. Shut up. I just keep my head down, and I want to get out of there without anything going bad.
Well, you are long-haired. All we need to do is, have you to be handicapped and drunk.
Do they hate your hair?
2/3 of the way there.
Do they hate your hair?
I don't think. If they do, they don't talk. They don't talk about it. They're one of those people that they'll hate me when I'm not around, but when I'm there, they'll just.
I'm really shocked that we got this
two-faced.
deep into the Joe Duvall in-law
sorry.
situation. No, I'm surprised that you want to talk about it. Like,
Someone
they know will probably listen to this and then go tell them and make your relationship even more awkward now.
Maybe. I don't know. It can't get much more awkward than it is right now. Ooh. I'll put it that way. That's probably not even true. It's at the point where it was awkward, and now we're at the point where we're just going to pretend like we're going to forget how awkward it was at one point.
Beautiful.
Joe, does the missus listen to the podcast?
No.
Okay.
Man.
If she did, is she going to have grievance with this?
No.
Okay.
She wouldn't.
So some wives can handle that, and some are like, we're not airing that
We don't.
stuff. So
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to fake it. We're talking about it. I'm telling you how it went.
I'm for it. I got
being
you.
real.
I get in trouble all the time. Tiffany listens to the podcast. I get in a lot of trouble.
My friends listen to the podcast, and they'll be probably cheering as they listen. So,
By the way, I like Tiffany. Just since she's a listener, I think you got a good one there, Josh. She might hate me. I don't know.
She does not. She likes you and Eddie. Every time we go to San Antonio, well, she's never met Joe. I didn't mean that as like for those not listening. Tiffany and Joe have not met.
Yeah,
that sounded so bad.
I know. I heard that.
Now,
Joe, everyone hates you. I don't know why that is.
I heard that.
There have been previous coworkers that maybe she wasn't as crazy about, but you two, and she likes what she knows of Joe. She thinks Joe's funny on the radio when she listens, but I've never heard anything more than that. So, but of course, most of her laughs and gasp are safe for Eddie. I think Tiffany might have just the smallest of sweet spot for Eddie. So,
Yes.
yeah, buddy.
Congratulations, you're in the friend zone.
Eddie dwarfs us all, by the way. You speak of Josh as the golden cow, which he really is. But everywhere I go, it's
Eddie.
It's Eddie. What's Eddie doing? Is Eddie here?
I need to start selling like T-shirts and
Eddie's arm.
You are like a living caricature.
I'll take
Literally, one of my best friends listens, and he comments when Eddie says something funny. Like, he'll tell me about how funny that was. And like, this is a guy I've known since 7th grade.
It's a good man.
By the way,
Good man.
If we want
He's also a Cubs fan, Eddie.
See?
there you go.
It's good people. Surround yourself.
If we wanted to get back on track here real quick and talk about, I wanted to hit on a couple more things on Pro Day. If we could give a yearly award for most aware, we should, a player that maybe was most aware of his status heading into OU's Pro Day, we can now call that award the Stan Von Taylor Award because he did not compete in Pro Day.
I didn't even think about it, but yeah, that's true.
And I'd like to talk to him about that.
The anti-Chica Madu Award?
Did he just? Oh, yeah. I think it'd be more like the anti-Brett Bowers Award. The Brett Bowers Award would be the award for person that needs to give it up. Because Casey Walker at least has played in the league.
Yeah, that was more of just, hey, I have a chance to get some scouts get their eyes on me. I'm going to go up there and
Dominic Whaley coming back, not nearly as embarrassing as Brett Bowers coming back.
No.
And I think Whaley's 40 time was fairly respectable, somewhere around 4.6. I mean, by the way, speaking of Whaley real quick, I saw him and watched him run that 4.6, and it made me think about what his career could have been if not for that injury at K-State.
Broken ankle.
Because he could fly. That run he had against Texas, he could move. And being able to still run a 4.6 after not playing football.
Let me stop you, Joe. It would have been short.
But it would have been.
He was
something.
still a walk-on that for a reason.
I think he cashes a check.
He was the best. No, he was the best running back Oklahoma at that time. But that was the worst that running back position has been since Kewan Jones was a starter.
Wasn't he there when Finch was there? Finch and Clay.
Yeah,
he started over those guys.
And
well,
where
they
are
had been true freshmen, I think, that year.
Yeah, I think Finch broke his leg. I think before in either spring or fall camp, his freshman year, and then Brennan Clay he was okay, but I mean, what kind of career did Brennan Clay have?
Both those guys were rivals 100 running backs. I don't know. I just thought it was Dominique Whaley out there running a 4.6. Still impressive. Maybe think that he was a guy that could play running back in the day. I think people forget how good he was before that injury because he did come out of nowhere.
He was okay. Even before that injury, he was
I think he's a cup of coffee guy. I mean, he gets a shot. Yeah. I don't think he probably does anything, but I bet he would have got invited to a roster for sure.
Yeah, he was never going to be a pension guy. I mean, he was never going to get his 3 years in the league.
And speaking of like the 40, I can almost understand why Chikamadou, if you're there, run the 40, fine. But why on earth do the bench press? If you do the 40, you might get a gust from God and pull off a 4.4 that's miraculous. You don't know. But if the bench press, why on earth put yourself through that? What do you? I think he put up 6 or 7. You can choose which ones you want to do. Samaje Perine just did one event.
Yeah, Samaje also went to the combine though,
and did everything there.
Everything.
Yeah,
I know.
He just wanted to improve his 40 time, which I think out of everything, and we haven't talked about is Samaje Perine, because to me he's going to go down in history as one of the best backs to ever play at Oklahoma. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he'll have a great NFL career, but judging by the company that he's in, if he stays healthy, he should have an NFL career of some note.
Yeah, I definitely think that he's going to, obviously he's going to get drafted. I think that it's just going to depend on where he goes and what kind of situation he goes to. I think that he could be a perfect guy that you get that second and third down reps. And I guess what I'm saying is I don't ever see him being the go-to guy in an offense, but I think he could have a 7-8 year career and have a really, really nice I guess longevity.
Where he would be? He would be surprising to me. Like, look at New England, he would be something, I think, in New England. But like, look at Atlanta. That has like a 2 running back system. It doesn't really have a star. But if he got into one of those systems where you were one of a 2-headed monster at running back and didn't really have a star that was going to take most of the reps, I think he could be really successful in that role.
What
in the
about
NFL.
He could go to Denver? They just have Devontae Booker from last year. Booker's more of a speed guy. He could go someplace like that and do okay.
I could see the Cowboys taking a chance on him in like the 5th round. Put him with Ezekiel Elliott. That wouldn't be bad.
It's a whole new NFL. There's I don't know. Are there any Adrian Petersons out there left? Just one guy? Carrying the whole load? I think when I think of Samaje, I think of almost like a big Maurice Jones-Drew kind of type. When Maurice Jones-Drew came up, he even was splitting carries with Fred Taylor. Something like that for Samaje in some sort of role where he can pair with someone like that. To me, I think he has a long NFL career, but I'm with Eddie that he might not be the guy
if he stays healthy.
Yeah, he needs to stay healthy. Then that's something that he really wasn't able to. It's odd to say that he wasn't able to do at Oklahoma, and he ends his career as the all-time leading rusher. That's how good he was.
But I think guys like Geno Lewis, Austin Roberts, Jordan Wade, those are guys that are probably going to get free agent contracts. I can't really see that for, a Dakota Austin, Jarvis Baxter, Daniel Brooks, those guys. Jordan Wade I thought did some really good things. I was actually
30 reps.
That was impressive. I was standing there right next to Jordan Wade, and he was leaving. And I think it was like Charles Tapper and a couple of other, maybe it was like Austin Roberts, and they were like, "Hey, Jordan, don't you want to stay and talk to GMs?" And Jordan just looked at him. He goes, "Why?" He's like, "I got an agent," and then he just walked out. Which I think all the GMs had talked. He said he talked to everybody he needed to talk to already, but like he's just a guy. I'm not saying he doesn't care, but he just has a funny personality to me.
I think Jordan Wade could make some noise. I don't know if he can be a long guy in the league, but I think he can make some plays and get on to
He's
a
almost
team.
like that guy from like North Carolina A&T that somebody might take a chance on and end up just being a starter in the league somewhere.
I mean, if you just look at the tape, I mean, he basically played almost every down 2 years ago, and then he had a really good game. Or not a really good game, but he had a good game good season this past year. And you know, when a guy like Stacey McGee is signing $25 million contracts in the league, I feel like a guy like Jordan Wade can play in the league.
Stacey McGee's really good.
Is that a shot at Stacey McGee?
Jordan Phillips really
shot?
good. I mean, Stacey McGee's really good. I mean,
he's had a really good career. He's been in Oakland for 4 years and signs with who'd he sign with yesterday?
Redskins.
That's right.
Yeah.
$25 million.
Stacey didn't you kind
It's
of think
been a good offseason for OU players.
it's been huge. Yeah,
they made
Kenny
some money.
Stills, Tony Jefferson, Jordan, Stacey McGee.
And Kenny Stills is the highest drafted guy out of that bunch, and he was the sixth.
He was going to have a lot more flyers to send out to recruits coming up, more than just the Trent Williams, Adrian Peterson.
Those guys, I have a feeling those are going to be all over this summer.
Now that Lane Johnson's passed his thing, hopefully, I didn't see. Is he redone his deal because of that yet, or
I haven't seen anything.
As long as they don't cut him, I guess it just goes on.
Because he came back and played the last game of the season.
Yeah.
They
weird.
They play him every chance they get when he's not suspended, which makes you think that they like him. But
tackles are getting so hard in this league in the NFL.
While we're talking about defensive tackles, Carey, we have to talk about your conversation with one Charles Walker.
Okay, yeah. There's nothing, and I'm going to write this story this weekend, but there's nothing that he told me. If you are angry at Charles Walker, there's nothing that he told me that's going to make you less angry. There's some things he said that were kind of head scratchers to me. He still firmly believes that he's doing the right thing. To me, he's coming off as a little bit of a victim in that he's trying to use the excuse that he played one season, hurt with that bad wrist, as an excuse to say, this is why I deserve to be able to hang it up now. Trying to kind of deflect the fact that he has serious concussion issues. But I don't think there's any question. He has some serious issues, like concussion related, that I think are going to keep teams from wanting anything to do with him.
I just don't. I guess, is he in denial of the fact that he's a defensive lineman that uses his head probably 95% of the time when he comes off the ball?
To a great degree, yes.
I mean, I just don't understand where this point is in his life that he's just like, it's like, I don't know, it's like a golfer almost saying, yeah, I have a terrible back, but I plan on playing a lot of golf here in the next summer.
It was interesting because I was talking to him at one point, and I didn't bring it up. He brought up the Mike Stoops thing, calling him a quitter. And he's still obviously very bothered by that. And he has had, I think, a number of people that he has looked to support him and tell him everything he's doing right is right. And I think he knows that there's a segment, even the fans, Mike Stoops, that believe him to be a quitter. And he continued to say that people just don't understand, and that because he's doing this for his family, it doesn't matter what other people think. And it was circuitous. It just kept going in the same direction. It was like I could never nail him down on really anything specific. He did at one point tell me he started going into having hallucinations after that TCU game, and he even mentioned that they brought in a priest at one point, or a pastor. I can't remember exactly which one he said, but basically like someone to chase the demons away.
That is some wild shit.
And I mean, I'd heard that stuff, and back in the day, I didn't ever say anything, but he started talking about that stuff when we talked after Pro Day the other day.
Like I would hope that he's not meeting with teams, and I mean, do you tell teams this kind of stuff, and do teams just like, that's normal?
I think, Eddie, that's the problem. I think the demon stuff really happened, from what I've heard. That's what he said happened.
Basically,
but how do you move on? How do you tell teams I mean,
he had. I mean, essentially, he had neurological disorders from playing football and head trauma, and he's now trying to sell teams on the fact that trauma has cleared itself up. Yeah. The question is, do teams believe that, and are they willing to take a chance on someone that has had that? Because they're going to talk to their doctors, and they're probably going to say, look, if he's had these symptoms and this has happened to him, then are we going to be liable for like a Junior Seau situation from his family if one day it continue, he has another concussion and this stuff comes back?
And how do you flip that around and say, I've done enough on the field to take this chance on me?
Yeah, that's the other thing.
I don't think that he has.
That's the hard part about this whole thing is how do you, if you leave football, if you retire, say, I can't add these many hits because I'm seeing things. I'm having head trauma. I can't keep doing this. That's a very understandable thing for people. Like, okay, yeah, I mean, you don't want to keep putting yourself through that kind of trauma if you're having hallucinations, if you're having some sort of mental trouble. What's then hard is to say, all right, then to sell yourself to the NFL. Yeah, that is a tough transition for Charles Walker to make, and I don't know if anybody can do it, and someone who's going through that, I don't know how they can do it. That's just got to be a tough way to sell yourself coming off of that stuff, and also I think it also points out why I always got where Mike Stoops was coming from, but why calling him a quitter was always the wrong word. It was always the wrong word to use because it's gonna stick. It's just gonna linger.
Mike Stoops would never think about whether he's saying the right or the wrong word.
And he doesn't have to. I don't think he has to, but I still think that's maybe he can learn from that in the future. He can think that, but
Mike can learn from that?
Yeah, I think so.
No chance.
He could. You don't think?
No
are you
chance.
saying are you saying that there's not an opportunity to learn, or that he just won't learn from that?
That's like telling Joe Pesci you can't stab people in the neck with a pen.
I like Mike Stoops and Joe Pesci. I like that kind of.
They're
imagery.
very. That's it. I have literally had that moment where Mike Stoops has pulled the "so I'm a clown, so I amuse you" thing on me, and he was screwing with me.
Dance.
I would love to see more Mike
He hasn't
Stoops.
shot me in the foot.
Yeah.
I haven't been Spider yet.
I would love to see some Mike Stoops, Joe Pesci impressions next time we talk to him.
You can do that.
Yeah, feel free to ask.
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. Do you think
I'll make sure the camera's recording.
No, I'm not saying he's done impressions. I'm saying Mike Stoops is Joe
just
Pesci
he is?
in Goodfellas.
I think Mike feels like the kind of guy that wouldn't even know the reference. Like he's such a football guy. He'd be like, "What are you talking about?"
he would he's just is Joe Pesci.
Yes.
100%. That's who he is.
Except he doesn't kill people that I know of.
Did you know that Joe Pesci?
Gary Simon did leave Norman pretty quickly.
No, has anyone heard of
Nobody.
Gary Simon?
Yeah,
And
nobody
has
heard his
not been
name.
heard from. Mm-hmm.
Does anybody know where Cortez Johnson's doing these days?
Oh man,
It's been a while since I've seen Chijoke.
we did see Hatari Bird though, so that's a good sign.
Oh God.
Hatari Bird. We don't know where L.J. Moore is, but Hatari Bird was around.
All
And
right.
Hatari Bird working at linebacker. What a shocker.
Yeah, if he would have made that move like 3 years ago, maybe he'd still be here. Or he'd be leaving a senior that had played a lot.
Yeah, leaving in red and white.
Although, you know what? What's
blue
bizarre
and gold
what's bizarre about Hatari is he might have been too stiff to be a linebacker.
Yeah.
He's just all muscle.
I remember interviewing him at that very first 5-star challenge in Atlanta, the one we were talking about with Stan Vaughn was at. And he was so physically developed, so much beyond all the other kids there. It was pretty unreal.
Kind of the same at the pro day. I mean, he might have been the most yoked guy there, and he didn't play football a year ago.
Somebody literally did say, "Oh, what could have been?" And I just rolled my eyes. Like, he's always looked like that. It's like his physique was never his problem. It was his agility.
Same with Cortez Johnson, right? Cortez Johnson was pretty yoked.
I say that was his up in his head more than his ability. Because if you're a corner and you can't get it down, that's like the simplest position.
Yeah.
You're big and you're tall and you have athletic ability and you can't excel, you're not smart. So.
I'm trying to think of a better example of a guy like that, if somebody that doesn't know football, they look at a guy and be like, oh, that's a football player. That's what it looks like. And can't actually play the game very well. Like, I'm trying to think of a better example through OU over the last few years than Hatari Bird. Like, just kind of a physically impressive dude that doesn't have it.
Yeah, it is a rarefied air that he's in, because you have some guys like Ronell Lewis that have the same issues, but they're just that much better athletically. They can overcome that stuff.
Does DeJuan Miller count in that category?
He could be in that conversation.
Yeah, I just never thought he was. A receiver has to be able to catch a football. I mean, that's his big. That was always DeJuan Miller's biggest problem, and he wasn't. He was stiff. He wasn't a great route runner.
And for those listening, the recruiting fans out there, this is the same question you're having about C.J. Moore that I get asked all the time. People have issues with his hands. That's why Oklahoma is not involved with the Rivals 100 guy within their own state. They don't think he can catch the ball.
I was standing. Right, I talked to Stephen Parker's dad for a while, and that's the first thing he asked me, is why you hadn't offered C.J. Moore.
Yep. C.J. Moore, he's 6'3", and he can really run. There's a whole lot to like, and it's not that he can't catch. He just has a lot of drops, and it's concerning. And when you look at the guys that Dennis Simmons and Cale Gundy have gone after, if there's anything you can say for them, those guys are sure-handed.
Well, I know you has no problem recruiting any receiver that they want right now.
Exactly. You're dead on.
All right, well, let's move to recruiting a little bit, because the Nike Rivals camp was this past weekend. Josh, you were out there. I know a lot of Oklahoma kids. I know the scoop today, you were hoping to release some information about a new offer that came out last night for the OL MVP of that camp. But just kind of go over your impressions, and maybe have some of the guys hit you up with some of their questions as well on what you saw.
Yeah, Bryce Bray is the guy you're talking about. Obviously, Oklahoma offered him last night. The offensive lineman from Bixby, a guy that came on the radar for us at the same time as Bray Walker. He was a freshman at the same Mustang team camp when we first saw Bray. And I know that's going to get confusing, Bryce Bray and Bray Walker, but we'll do the best we can. But he is a guy that I always had a little bit of a question of where he was going to play. He was more suited to guard in the way he plays, but he really kind of had a tackle's frame because he was kind of long and lean. Well, he started to fill out, came in at 309 at the camp. So, right where you need him to be as a guard, and he was friggin' dominant. He killed everybody, won O-line MVP, went against some really good players, guys with OSU offers, K-State offers. You go down the list, and I thought I expected him to be really technically sound, but I thought he moved his feet better than I anticipated. So he's a big-time guy that came out of that camp. I think Oklahoma's in a great spot for him. Bray Walker, to just kind of touch on him briefly, the OU commitment, he got an invite to the opening, which is really the point of these camps. That's what these kids are working for. So he was really dominant. It was my first chance to see R.J. Henderson, OU's 2019 wide receiver commitment. A little bit more of a slot than I had thought he might be. I thought he was going to kind of be an outside guy. And in an OU's offense where they'll use Sterling Shepard or Dede Westbrook on the outside, he's big enough to fill that role. He's taller than Sterling was, but he's more of a 6 foot, 180-pound kid than maybe the 6'1" plus that I had come in expecting. So he's just getting a better picture of him. But yeah, you can go down the list. There were a ton of guys. It was really good on the offensive line. I didn't see a lot of defensive line talent. It kind of shows out when you look at Oklahoma's offer list. There's not a lot from Texas, not a lot from Louisiana, Oklahoma. Speaking of Oklahoma, Ron Tatum was absolutely outstanding at the camp as well. I thought he kind of got a raw deal to not be one of the final five guys in the O-line, D-line stuff.
Speaking of Oklahoma, Josh, it just to continue on that, it feels like the state really did well there, and this is a really good year in the state of Oklahoma. And also in 2019, because you had Dax Hill down there, who it looks like did really well. Can you talk about Dax Hill, Jalen Redmond, even Wayne Jones? Did it feel like there was a big Oklahoma presence there, that the talent in Oklahoma is starting to get a little more respect?
I really think it is. I mean, Dax Hill, for those that don't know, went and ran a 4.46 electric, came in at about 6 foot, right around 182, 185. Is a guy, the thing, and Eddie and I have talked about this before when we went up to Booker T to see him last spring. The thing that sticks out to you when you watch Daxton Hill, his arms. Like, I bet his wingspan is 6'7". He has tremendously long arms, and when you watch him, he just gets into one passing lane after another. There's a great highlight going around on Twitter, and I'd give whoever shot it credit if I knew. But it's just him closing on a ball that looked like an easy go route win for a receiver in some of the pass scale stuff they were doing. And he comes out of nowhere to deflect the ball. And that's just what you're talking about with a guy that has great speed, just great explosive ability. You talked about it. I think Oklahoma kids are getting better and better at these camps because there's more of them. They get practice. People think, if you're a good football player, you just go to a camp and dominate, and sometimes it works that way. But the guys who have familiarity with training-type workouts, camp workouts, they do better because they know what to expect. It's calming for them. They don't have to think about things. They're not trying to figure out what they're going to do while trying to, play really well against another great player. So I think that just helps these things. And Jalen Redmond, he showed you a lot of ability, came in just under 6'3", about 228. I think he's a really natural fit for what OU's doing up front with the, kind of moving back and forth between a 4-3 and a 3-4. So there is a lot of talent, and as good as 2018 starting to look, especially at the top, I think 2018 is really solid. The depth is a little bit questionable. 2019 looks like it may be really, really good.
Josh, at that same event, Oklahoma got a commitment from Patrick Fields, another Oklahoma guy from Tulsa Union, and it's looking like, Carey's kind of talked about this a little bit, is that the DB recruiting starting to shape up where Oklahoma might look like their safety class. They can maybe get 3 safeties here with Patrick Fields and Jones and then Proctor. How do you see this kind of safety class pairing out, and what do you think of Fields?
I think you're dead on. I think we talked a little bit about it in the scoop, and I think there's been this impression that maybe Patrick Fields is going to have a negative impact on Josh Proctor from Owasso. Those guys went through every drill, were hanging out together after the event together. I mean, they were side by side, locked at the hip from beginning to end. And if I'm guessing, I think that's Patrick Fields' work, and he's now trying to bring Josh Proctor with him. He strikes me as a kid a lot like Justin Broyles. He's going to dive right into recruiting, going to try to bring guys with him, playing at a place like Union and having kind of that street cred that comes with that. He's going to be able to get attention from a lot of different guys. He's going to know a lot of players. So I think that's going to be a very good role for him to take on as one of Oklahoma's lead recruiters. But I like Fields. I think he's one of these guys that people watch on tape, and he's not 6'2" and going to crush you every time you come across the middle.
Kind of the opposite of what we were talking about earlier.
What's that?
It's kind of the opposite of what we were talking about earlier. He's someone who we were talking about guys who looked the part but didn't play it. He's someone who doesn't quite look the part, but man, he's got it up. He's got the head game and he's got everything else.
You're right. I mean, I like Patrick. He's one of those guys, the more I watch on tape, the more I tend to like him. You see him recognizing plays, reading things very quickly. He reacts to the ball and coverage very naturally. But the thing that I like best about him is a lot of times you'll see safeties when they're in a zone concept and then a receiver will come by deep and it becomes their responsibility. Well, they immediately, you call it zone. They're in a man-to-man situation then when the ball goes in the air. That's just the way that is. And I feel like Patrick Fields, more than a lot of safeties, he doesn't panic when the ball's in the air. He doesn't get too handsy with the receiver where he's going to get a call against him. He's very natural, just kind of lets the play come to him, deflects it, puts it down, and then moves on about his business. So, I mean, he's very comfortable in a coverage situation for a guy that I think is very adept playing run. But like I said, I think he's a very multifaceted safety and can be a good one for OU.
To your point, I remember at the Norman North Tulsa Union game in the regular season where I saw him play. He had an interception in that game, where Norman North, I think, was doing something. They were doing trips to the right, and they kind of stacked them, and they were trying to muddy it up there, and they ended up having a guy run a wheel route out of that. And you could see Patrick, he never panics. When he sees the formation, he kind of sits back, waits the wheel route come to him, and he's basically staring the quarterback down as he throws the interception to him. He's just someone who I remember talking to Will Johnson about this before. Will Johnson used to say, if you watch the film enough, it's almost too easy. If you watch the offensive film enough, you can really start to see what the play is going to be, what's going to happen here, what their tendencies are. And Patrick feels like a guy who really studies that part of the game and just feels comfortable about what's going to come next to him. And it's almost like that chess game. He's good at that part of it. And also, to your point, talking to him, people like Patrick a lot. The Justin Broyles thing I thought was good. He's maybe not as magnanimous as Justin is, but he's someone that guys just like. I remember after that North game, he came up to me and said, man, Charlie Kolar, he can play, he can catch. And he respects guys on the other side. And I think he's someone that you really are going to be happy to have in your class if you're an OU fan. Like you said with Justin Broyles, you posted a video of this. There's a mentality building among these OU commitments, and tell me if I'm wrong, there's a more tight-knit group. It's not so much, all right, there's a commitment over there, there's a commitment over there. They're all in this together. I think that's something that Bob Stoops also talked about on signing day, how he talked about that 17 class really built their own identity. And do you feel that starting to happen here in 2018 as well?
To some degree. It's a little more difficult when, you got Cam Rising in California, you got Bray in Oklahoma, Jordan Austin is in Texas and really hasn't been that vocal and involved. So, I mean, I think Pat's the kind of guy that can start to bring that together. Because, I mean, Bray Walker is not the kind of dude that's going to go hit people up and be recruiting all the time. That's just not his style. Cam will do it some, kind of like Chris Robinson. Like, he'll be involved and he'll certainly pitch in and do some work. But I think he's not one of those guys that's naturally his first thought is, I want to go win a national championship and I've got to go get all the guys to do it. Like that's not and people are going to take that as, oh, he doesn't care about that. That's not what I'm saying. He's a high school kid. And that's not his only thought in life. Some kids just aren't wired like that. And I think a good example of a kid that is wired like that, Robert Barnes was at the Nike opening talking to people, like hanging out in his OU gear, just out there kind of seeing what was going on. Now, I'm not saying he's out there recruiting, but he was present. He was there. And I think that's just Robert's style. And it's one of these things that some kids have and some kids don't. And Pat's one of those kids that I think has that. I think he will go and work on kids, talk to people, but at the same time is savvy enough not to just hound people. Like, people think that, just calling kids all the time and doing all that stuff, it'll work against you. There's a fine line from I'm trying to help my school to you're bugging this kid.
Robert Barnes sounds like he will take over for me as the co-publisher of Soonerscoop.com. It'll be Eddie Radosevich and Robert Barnes running Sooner Scoop when Josh and I retire.
Well, take a look at his resume. I don't know about that. Maybe.
Do we really think Eddie's going to share power? Eddie, when we're in the retirement home, Eddie's going to be total authoritarian.
Eddie would be such a dictator, wouldn't you?
It'd be awesome. It'd be awesome.
You're crazy.
Eddie would send people to Tulsa to get video of a kid that he has no interest in putting on Rivals just so he could get Coney Islander.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, and after his employees Gaddafi him, Joe's going to bring in a reign of peace and love and hippieism.
See, this is where Eddie and I are different. I've said my entire life I've been into politics and history and stuff, but I've always wanted to be a vice president. That seems like the role for me. I don't want to be the president. I don't want to be in charge of everything. Vice president seems like a nice wheelhouse for me.
No, but Eddie will make you do all the work.
Yeah,
as vice president?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Eddie's got one of those switches he can't turn off even if he wants to.
You really are. Like, I can't believe, like, you're going to Dallas this weekend just to have fun? Mm-hmm. That's true? That happens with you?
Yeah, it's going to get real
Is
weird
there a kid that needs to, like...
It's going to get real
Are you videotaping a kid while you're down there or something?
No, just going down, hanging out with some buddies, going to Greenville. So if you're down in Greenville, come on.
It's going to get weird.
Where are you guys going to be hanging out?
I don't know. Probably some house party. They do a big thing for St. Patrick's Day. So
if the cops tell you to stay where you are, do not run. Because Baker Mayfield can't get away. You can't get away.
I'll just talk my way out of it. Cops give me rides. I don't need the cops. They give me rides places.
What does that mean?
Cops, hashtag cops are Eddie's Uber.
I've sat front row in a cop car leaving Campus Corner, and they drove me home. Fact.
Did you know the cop?
No, but he knew the guys I was with,
Oh,
so
okay.
it helped.
Is he a former Fiji?
No, I think he just appreciated the work that the guys did that I was with.
Do you get do the Fijis invite you to come and speak to their youngsters or anything?
No,
are you celebrity that way yet?
I did my 2 years after I graduated. I went back and, or actually, I might have been a fifth year. I went back and gave a rush speech. Took my shirt off and everything. It was good. People still come up to me to this day I was going through Rush in 20 whatever it was.
And you were the one that made me pick Fiji.
Yeah. In fact, I ran into a couple guys that on Bourbon Street.
Maybe someday you will be able to go back and give PC North a pregame pep talk.
I'm going to be the head coach, so yeah, I'll have to.
What experience do you have to be the head coach at Putnam City North?
I played with a Heisman Trophy winner. Hired.
Played a state championship game.
We semis.
I always want to put you with Warren. I always want to do that, and I don't know why.
Not that old.
Sam's junior year was his best. Your senior year, so
we had some good players.
That offensive line completely fell apart.
Thought you guys had him that year, Eddie.
Deji Kareem on that team?
Thought you had him.
Deji was in my grade. I played 8th grade ball with him too. They were we kicked a field goal with a minute 32 left. They went down.
That was it.
Went down.
In fact, I think Josh and I that was we were the two people that were always trumpeting Sam's horn, is because he was such a different quarterback as a senior because he was just running for his life on every play.
Getting killed.
We had a member that quoted his touchdown and interceptions his senior year and told me, this guy, and I didn't know it until after the fact. I went to high school with this guy. He was a couple years ahead of me, and he went on the board and just burned me down for thinking that Sam would be a starter. And I was like, and I don't want anybody to hear this to misunderstand. I did not foresee what Sam Bradford would become. But I think he'll be a multi-year starter at OU. That was as far as I went with it. And this guy was like, "You're an idiot. You need to quit your job. You don't even know what you're looking at. Look at his numbers." And I'm like, guys, I watched his games. That dude is trying not to die every Friday night.
No, he was. I remember his junior year when he would just be able to stay back in the pocket and throw it, even as skinny as he was. He had a cannon. It was unbelievable.
At the end of his recruitment, who was in on him outside of OU?
Michigan, Texas Tech.
That was it?
Yep.
And Michigan was not. You got to realize Michigan, they weren't all that great then.
No, that was.
And Texas Tech, they were just. That was a Texas Tech evaluation right there.
I'd say he would have done well. He would have been great in Texas Tech system. But
I remember talking to Bob Wilson, North's head coach at the time, and he was talking about this, his coaches were coming through that winter to come see Sam and have a look at him. One coach would come in and be and it would be, let's say UCO. They're Texas Tech should be all over that kid. Well, the next day Texas Tech would come in and be Michigan should be all over him. And then Michigan would come in and they were involved. And Michigan comes in and they're you should be all over this kid. And it just kind of grew and grew. And he just, Sam could have had more offers than he did. He just never really pursued it because once OU was in, Eddie could speak to it better than I could, but I think this decision was pretty much made at that point.
Yeah, I think once OU offered, it was over. It was completely over. He wasn't. Yeah. There was only one school. I actually came down here on a visit with him.
Did you?
Yeah.
Just unofficial?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was unofficial. It was against Nebraska, and Bill Callahan kicked a field goal to cover.
30-3 or whatever.
So that was his junior year?
Yes.
Because you would have been a freshman.
Yeah.
That was what?
It would have been my senior year, his
05?
junior year. Yeah, 05.
Yeah.
2005.
Wait. Oh, you were a year behind him, Eddie?
Yeah.
I always have it in my head you were a year ahead of him.
No,
Okay,
I was a year older
now.
than him.
Okay.
He robbed the cradle.
Yeah. They one of my all-time claims to fame will be well, not fame, but this kid from Cooper, he's not coming in and starting at North. And sure enough, he did. Sam Bradford. Because I went to Hefner.
It's like, what the Cooper?
Middle school talk.
See, Eddie knows that I know what he's talking about. I know.
Yeah, Josh
I
is the
can
only
drive
guy
to Cooper right now. So,
All right, so Rivals Camp's getting ready to start. New Orleans coming up this weekend, but I know we will be at the Dallas and the St. Louis camps, which I have no idea what dates those are right now.
April 2nd for Dallas, and I think a short time after that for St. Louis, if I remember right, 8th or 9th, maybe the
I
next
want to say
weekend.
April 23rd, something like that. Hang on, I've got it here. May 21st to St. Louis.
Boom.
April and then May, so 2 different months.
Yep, almost 2 months apart. But yeah, I will be at New Orleans. I'm going to go over there and catch that. With all that Oklahoma's done in Louisiana over the last few years, it seems like something I've got to be at. Just looking over some of the guys I see on the roster.
Try and take
Lawrence
pictures.
Keys is a wide receiver offer.
Try and take pictures, and we can play Find the Bag Man. Just take a lot of pictures up in the stands.
Just shoot everybody, all the hangers on around the stadium.
Yeah,
I got you. Devontae Jason, the wide receiver committed to Kansas. That's a Rivals 100 guy. Joe Fuchsia, he's a safety offer. I mean, there's really one of the more interesting guys that I'm anxious to see for a couple of reasons is Cameron Wire, the offensive tackle that OU offered just the other night, who is the high school teammate of Adrian Ely, who just signed with Oklahoma. So he'll be there at the camp. A big, long guy. I had a chance to see him last year when I went to see Ely, and he's not as physically overwhelming as Adrian Ely, but he is every bit of 6'6", 260. I mean, he looks like an NBA power forward. He is real rangy guy. So, I mean, not surprisingly, it's New Orleans. There's going to be a bunch of talent, and probably I'll find 5 new names that OU should be looking at. So, I mean, that stuff always comes about in kind of these camps in the Southeast.
By the way, as we are doing the podcast, it's Friday afternoon. For some of you guys that just listen to the podcast that aren't subscribers to the site, every day on the Crimson Corner, that's our premium message board, we keep a running track of everything that's going on throughout the day in recruiting. One of the interesting things that was put up today was Josh's post with the Friday notes about Cameron Rising setting up some visits. Or saying he's going to take some unofficial visits. And you know what? If I'm impartial in this thing, and I know, that Lincoln Riley is one of the hottest names in college football right now, I don't think it's such a stupid thing to kind of keep the door open and, look at other schools. Now, if OU fans are like, shut up, Carey, don't tell them that stuff, but you got to be realistic in this thing. And I'm wondering, like, at some point, does OU have to monitor this and start being realistic and saying, well, maybe we need to kind of keep communication open with some other quarterbacks as well?
Well, look at it. I mean, they never really closed the door on Casey Thompson. I'm not saying OU's actively recruiting him, but he's come to some games. He's been around. So Oklahoma's never – I think they're aware that you have to, especially at that position, be ready to jump if something crazy happens. Now – and I said it in that post, I don't think this is much. I don't think this is a huge deal. I think he'll visit Texas. His dad has some connection to Tom Herman. And I get any time that Texas comes up, OU fans just, kind of pucker. I don't know how else to say it. They get real concerned. But this isn't a kid in Austin, Texas. This isn't a kid in Houston, Texas. He's from Los Angeles. He's going to go to wherever, if he's picking a Big 12 school, pick the one that's got a couple Heisman Trophy guys on the roster, a potential another one next year who's going to have a clear and present wide open quarterback spot when he enrolls in school next January. So I think Oklahoma has to be very present of mind about the situation with Lincoln Riley because he and Cameron Rising are very close. But as long as they make sure that's not the only connection that he has to OU, I think by the time that Lincoln Riley could take a job, I think all these spots are going to be gone. I don't see places that Cameron Riley actually choose over Oklahoma having a spot for him should things, like I said, should Lincoln Riley's status change.
All right. Well, I think we've got to end this thing eventually. I've got to go back and find Joe's F-bomb so I can get that out so I can put this up.
My bad. I feel
Damn
so
it,
bad.
Joe.
I feel so bad.
At least it was somewhere near the beginning. There are going to
be first 10 minutes.
Yeah. The best part about this podcast is that you dropped the F-bomb, yet we can talk about it the entire time. So people aren't going to be like, I wonder what he said. No, you're going to know. He said F.
Under my reign, you would have been fired immediately.
All right. Well, Joe, be thankful that we're not under Eddie's reign.
Are we all thankful?
Every day.
I also think that under Eddie's reign, that somehow Sooner Scoop would already have a private jet, even though they couldn't afford it, and there would be some type of Ponzi scheme that afforded him the ability to be flying all over the country.
I've always wanted.
This sounds like our first segment, like under Eddie's reign, like kind of like Conan O'Brien back in the year 2000. Like what will happen under Eddie's reign? Like we could have him give us some scenarios.
Yeah, maybe it could be a weekly feature of how he will illegally run this company into the ground.
If you want to be successful, you have to portray success. So I could see him with the Sooner Scoop private jet.
Bagman.
Spend billions to make thousands.
Eddie would secretly be running a sports agency on the back end.
I don't know about a sports agency. Probably a nice little
Bagman service.
There'd be a nice little point shaving.
Well, yeah,
scandal.
I mean, you should be a bag. Yeah, there would be gambling involved. You would have to be a bagman too because it would benefit Sooner Scoop by paying athletes to come to OU in the first place,
or paying him not to come to OU. How about that?
Find the bad ones that you didn't like, the guys you didn't like.
Yeah.
Hey, Cameron Rising, here's $50K. Why don't you just go to UCLA?
See you in Tempe.
I would never sentence somebody to athletic career death by going to UCLA.
I think Eddie would send like Tate Martell to Texas just to fuel that rivalry.
No, Tate Martell doesn't deserve to be in Division I.
Yeah, I mean, Joe's got a point though. You should orchestrate certain things that make recruiting even more interesting. Like, I think putting Darrell Wyatt back at Texas would be a start, or maybe put him at like Oklahoma State.
I like Mike
Instead
Gundy
of
too
Houston.
much.
Mike Gundy's coming into his prime.
This isn't about what you like and you don't like. This is about the dollar bills.
I think under Eddie's reign is all about what Eddie likes.
Eddie would take weekend trips down to his own Mar-a-Lago, whatever that will be in Florida.
I think if it's what
great.
if it's what Eddie likes, I think we'll probably make a lot of money with how many people like Eddie.
Eddie will have all of his dinners in public with Bob Stoops so people can come around and take photos. They exchange recruiting lists.
That wouldn't be bad. That wouldn't be a bad thing.
Get Steve Spurrier on payroll somehow to.
But is Eddie
100%.
going to? Are they going to split up the tab, or does Eddie have to eat like a pice of hamburger and some water, and then later talk about how it was he was robbed of this tab?
No, I'm not a douchebag.
He just passes it on to all the old ladies that he's convinced are subscribing to Cat Fancy or whatever his Ponzi scheme is.
That'd be awesome. I think I got a lot of planning to do this weekend.
For when your reign begins?
Yeah.
Okay.
Be drinking.
All right. Don't get arrested, Eddie. Although,
If you do film it,
I guess you could stay in the pokey a few days, and this time of year it wouldn't really hurt.
Yeah. You know what? You know what I'll do if I do get arrested in Dallas this weekend? I will come back.
Let's not have this scenario.
Well, I was just gonna. It's not gonna happen. I highly doubt that. But knock on wood. If I do come back, I'll have a full report on if Parrish Cobb is hard or not. I don't think he is. So.
All right, and on that note, that will end the Unofficial 40 for this week. Thanks to Josh McQuistion, who cannot wait to leave and go probably hug his daughter to know that humanity still exists. I'm not thanking Eddie Radosevich for this show. I do thank Joe Duvall, even though he dropped an F-bomb that I now have to go find and bleep out before I can post this podcast. So until next time, go on iTunes, give us a rating, regardless of what Eddie does to your view of humanity. And we'll see you next time right here on the Unofficial 40 on Soonerscoop.com.